I never thought my wedding day would end with my own parents disowning me, but that's exactly what happened. You're dead to us. My mother's voice cracked with fury as she stood in our family's lavish living room, her perfectly manicured fingers trembling as she pointed at me. How dare you throw away everything we built for you? I stood there in my simple white dress, the one I'd chosen instead of the $50,000 designer gown they'd insisted on. Next to me, Michael, my then-fiancé, squeezed my hand supportively. We just announced our plans to get married, thinking my parents would be happy for us. How wrong we were. He's a nobody, my father roared, his face turning an alarming shade of red. A public school teacher? Is this some kind of joke, Olivia? We raised you to take over Sullivan Industries, not to throw your life away on some peasant. The word peasant echoed through the room like a slap. Michael tensed beside me but maintained his dignity. That's one of the things I loved most about him. His quiet strength. Dad, I love him, I said firmly, standing my ground. He's brilliant, kind, and makes me happier than any of those trust fund boys you tried to set me up with. My mother let out a dramatic sob. What about James Patterson's son? His family's company is worth billions. We've been planning that merger through your marriage for years. And there it was, the truth finally spoken out loud. I wasn't their daughter. I was their business transaction. I'm not a commodity you can trade, I replied, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside me. I'm your daughter and I'm marrying Michael. My father's next words changed everything. If you walk out that door with him, you're no longer our daughter. Everything we promised you, your trust fund, your position at the company, your inheritance, it's all gone. I looked at my father, really looked at him. Behind his expensive suit and commanding presence, I saw something I'd never noticed before. Fear. He was afraid of losing control. Keep it all, I said quietly. I never wanted any of it anyway. That night, Michael found me crying in our small apartment. Not because I regretted my choice, but because it hurt to realize your own parents valued their business empire more than their daughter's happiness. We'll be okay, he whispered, holding me close. We have each other and that's what matters. What my parents didn't know, what no one knew, was that I'd been preparing for this moment for years. While they thought I was just their obedient daughter learning the family business, I had been building something of my own. During college, while maintaining the perfect daughter facade, I started my first company under a different name. By the time I met Michael, that company had grown into Phoenix Enterprises, one of the most aggressive and successful venture capital firms in the country. Every decision I made was carefully calculated, hidden behind layers of shell companies and discrete investments. My parents, in their arrogance, never bothered to look into who was quietly buying up shares of their competitors. They were too busy planning my future to notice I was already creating my own. The wedding was small and perfect, just close friends and Michael's loving family. My parents' absence left a hole in my heart, but I refused to let it overshadow our happiness. Michael's mother, a warm-hearted kindergarten teacher, hugged me and whispered, "You're our daughter now." For 2 years we built our life together. Michael continued teaching, touching young lives and making a real difference in our community. I ran my empire from the shadows, growing Phoenix Enterprises into something far more powerful than my parents could imagine. Then came the day I'd been waiting for. Sullivan Industries, my family's precious company, made a crucial mistake. They overextended themselves trying to acquire a promising tech startup, not realizing that startup was one of my shell companies. The trap was set. Now it was time to spring it. I sat in my home office looking at the final papers. One signature would start the process that would bring Sullivan Industries to its knees. Michael brought me a cup of coffee and kissed my forehead. "Are you sure about this?" he asked gently. I thought about my mother's tears, my father's threats, and the way they'd treated the man I loved like he was nothing. "Yes," I replied, picking up my pen. "It's time they learned that money isn't everything." The takeover notice was delivered to Sullivan Industries board the next morning. My father, always first in the office, would be the one to open it. I imagined his face as he read the CEO's name on the document. My name, my real name, and realized that the daughter he'd disowned now held the future of his company in her hands. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold. Sometimes it's served with a signature at the bottom of a takeover notice. The morning my father received the takeover notice, I watched it all unfold through the security cameras I'd had installed months ago. Being the major shareholder of the building's management company had its perks. 7:15 a.m. Right on schedule, my father strode into his corner office, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the marble floors. He hadn't changed much in 2 years. Same imposing posture, same air of untouchable authority. He had no idea his world was about to shatter. The envelope sat innocently on his desk, marked Urgent Board of Directors. I held my breath as he opened it, watching his expression shift from mild annoyance to confusion to absolute horror. "Impossible," he whispered, his face draining of color. His hands shook as he reached for his phone, probably calling his lawyers. But it was too late. The documents were ironclad, the takeover inevitable. My mother arrived at 9 a.m., bursting into his office in a flurry of designer perfume and panic. "Harold, please tell me it's not true. The board members are calling me non-stop." I switched on the audio feed, a decision I'd debated but ultimately couldn't resist. "It's her," my father's voice cracked. "Olivia. She's the CEO of Phoenix Enterprises." My mother collapsed into a chair, her perfectly maintained facade crumbling. But she's nothing. She married that teacher. How could she possibly? She played us," my father cut in, his voice hollow. "All these years, while we thought we were grooming her for our company, she was building her own empire." The next few hours were chaos. Board members rushed in and out of the office, lawyers huddled in conference rooms, and my parents aged years in minutes as they realized the extent of my control. Phoenix Enterprises didn't just own controlling shares in Sullivan Industries. We owned their main suppliers, their largest clients, and even the building they operated from. Every escape route they might have considered was already blocked. At 2 p.m., my assistant delivered the final blow, an invitation to an emergency board meeting. Location: Phoenix Enterprises headquarters. Time: 4 p.m. sharp. Attendance: mandatory. I chose my outfit carefully that morning. A sharp black suit that cost more than my father's car, but nothing flashy. Michael helped me with my necklace, the simple pearl strand he'd given me on our first anniversary. "Ready?" he asked, his eyes full of support. I kissed him softly. "Thanks to you I am." The boardroom at Phoenix was impressive, all floor-to-ceiling windows and sweeping city views. I sat at the head of the table watching through one-way glass as they filed in. My parents entered last, both looking like they'd walked into their own funeral. When I finally stepped through the door, the silence was deafening. My mother's hand flew to her throat, clutching her signature pearls. My father seemed to have stopped breathing entirely. "Good afternoon," I said calmly, taking my seat. "Let's discuss the future of Sullivan Industries." "Olivia," my father started, his voice barely a whisper. How did the daughter you threw away end up owning your company?" I finished for him, my voice cool and professional. "The same way you taught me, Dad. Strategic planning, careful investment, and absolute dedication." My mother found her voice, though it trembled. But you married him, that teacher." "Michael," I corrected her sharply. "My husband's name is Michael. And yes, I married the love of my life, a man who supports me, believes in me, and never once tried to use me as a business transaction." I opened my laptop, displaying the company's financials on the wall screen. "Now let's talk about Sullivan Industries' rather impressive debt load. The loans coming due next month are particularly concerning." "Those loans." My father's face went even paler. "You bought them too." I smiled, remembering all the times he'd lectured me about leveraging debt for business advantage. Every single one. The next hour was purely business. I outlined the terms of the takeover, the restructuring plans, and the new management structure. My parents sat in stunned silence as their empire was dismantled and rebuilt before their eyes. "And lastly," I said, turning to face them directly, "the matter of leadership. Dad, you'll be stepping down as CEO, effective immediately." He started to protest, but I held up my hand. "You can either retire quietly with a generous pension and your reputation intact, or we can discuss the irregular accounting practices I discovered in the company's offshore accounts. Your choice." My mother burst into tears, real ones this time, not the theatrical sobs she'd perfected over the years. "How could you do this to us? We're your parents." "We're my parents," I corrected her. "You made your choice 2 years ago, remember? I was dead to you." As the board members filed out, leaving me alone with my parents, my father finally asked the question I'd been waiting for. Why, he croaked. Why not just live your life with him? Why take everything we built? I stood up, gathering my papers calmly. Because you needed to learn what I learned long ago. That true worth isn't measured in dollars or corporate takeovers. It's measured in love, integrity, and the courage to stand up for what's right. And now, my mother whispered. What happens to us now? I handed them each an envelope. Inside you'll find details of your retirement packages, which are more than generous. You'll also find an invitation. They opened the envelopes with shaking hands. A dinner invitation? My father looked confused. Yes. Michael and I would like you to come to our home for dinner. Meet your grandchildren, the twins I gave birth to 6 months ago. You have 2 grandsons who've never met their grandparents. My mother's head snapped up. Grandchildren? We have. Their names are James and William. James is older by 3 minutes and already has Dad's stubborn chin. William has Mom's eyes. I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. The choice is yours. You can keep your pride and your prejudices, or you can be part of our family. A real family, not a business arrangement. I left them there, sitting in the wreckage of their corporate empire, holding invitations to something much more valuable, if they were wise enough to see it. Michael was waiting for me in the lobby. How did it go? I took his hand, feeling the strength and love that had supported me through everything. It went exactly as planned. But the hard part starts now. You think they'll come to dinner? I thought about my mother's face when I mentioned the twins, the flicker of longing I'd seen beneath her perfectly maintained mask. I hope so, I said quietly. Everyone deserves a second chance to learn what really matters. 3 days later, my parents' RSVP arrived. They had chosen family. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in destroying what others built, but in giving them a chance to build something better. My parents had raised me to take over their company, but Michael had taught me to create something far more precious. A family built on love, not ledgers. As I watched my father hold James for the first time, tears streaming down his face, and my mother singing softly to William, I realized that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's showing those who hurt you that there's a better way to live. Sullivan Industries still exists, but it's different now. We fund educational programs, support teachers like Michael, and measure success not just in profits but in lives improved. My parents are learning to be grandparents instead of business tycoons, and slowly we're all healing. Money can buy companies, but love builds families. That's a lesson worth more than any corporate takeover.